Welcome to another episode of B2B Startup Growth. I'm Shoa House, and in this podcast, I aim to share with you wisdom from some of the smartest B2B startup leaders and professionals that I know. We talk about all aspects of marketing, sales, growth hacking, life hacking, and everything in between. Hi, Nimo.
Hi, Shoham.
So happy to have you here today, finally, after we've been talking for such a long time.
Me too, for sure.
And what we're going to talk about today is growth hacking, which is something that was very popular to talk about, I think, about 10 years ago, 7 years ago, when growth hacking just started to be a thing. And what evolved with it over the years is that it got some bad traction with some practices that were associated with not doing good.
Mm-hmm.
And so people didn't like the term as much over the years and sort of deserted it. And lately, what I've been seeing is that companies in the B2B space in 2023 are putting aside all the politically correctness of naming practices, and they want the growth hacking because they want things that just make a difference and effectively. And I think you are the growth hacker that from all of the people who name themselves in this area, the most creative and resourceful that I've met. So I'm really privileged to have you talk with me about it today. And let's start, first of all, I'd like you to tell the audience a little bit about you, how you became a growth hacker.
Great. All right. So first of all, let me start with 3 disclaimers here.
Okay.
This is the first time I'm recording a podcast.
Wow.
So
what an honor for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's like lots of cameras and stuff, and I don't know where to look. Second, it's also the first time that I'm taking an interview in English.
Ooh.
So please excuse my Hebrew accent and the rest of the grammatical mistakes.
Who am I to excuse anybody's Hebrew accent?
And third is that because of my non-disclosure agreements with my clients, I'm not going to disclose who are the clients or what exactly they do. I'm just going to talk about my experience and kind of try to stay within the explanation of how to do things and the creative parts, and less talk about the specific customers or the specific targets. I started as a computer hacker, as a proper computer hacker in Unit 8200, which is the Israeli NSA. I've done that for about 10 years. And after that, I was a product manager at a few startups. And I did a lot of freelancing with growth hacking and product management back in the top of the hype about 10 years ago. And 7 years ago, I started a company here in Israel called Apollo Shield. We got accepted to Y Combinator, raised about $3 million. 7 years later, we became profitable. We sold homeland security equipment to police, to law enforcement, to stadiums, to prisons, law enforcement equipment that can detect and drive drones away so they don't enter into protected airspace. Our most prestigious place that we sold equipment to was the Qatar World Cup. And then about 6 months ago, I handed over the leadership at Apollo Shield to my now former co-founder. Started from scratch. And I decided to focus on something that I've actually been doing throughout all of these years as a consultant and as the CEO of Apollo Shield, which is growth hacking. And the thing that I liked the most about growth hacking, the way that I did it, involves 2 things. It involves the idea that you can take the largest database that ever existed, which is the internet, and use this in clever ways to do 2 things. First of all, to identify who are your most probable customers, using a lot of signals that you can collect nowadays that can really tell you at a huge scale about a really large number of people, or actually companies or job titles within these companies that have specific problems that your company really knows how to solve. So the idea that you can do all of this at scale is like really, really interesting to me. This is a part of like my upbringing in the Israeli intelligence. That's probably the part that I like about it. And the second
Do you
part,
feel that your background in intelligence has given you unique skills in doing that?
I guess so, because I mean, I think anybody with like the proper mindset can do this, but you really get a lot of like the ideas for, um, this could be really useful if I can find a person with, this, and this attributes. And you have also, you have the understanding that you need to find these attributes. You also have the skill and knowledge of how to find it at scale. And when you connect these two things, it's really powerful, and I really like it.
Okay.
And the second part, which I think is more the part that you think about when you're like in the intelligence community, is how do you reach out to these people in ways that make sense to them, like psychologically? How do you make it personal? How do you make it relevant to them? And how do you use it in different ways? And I can actually give you like 3 examples here. For like not only of like finding and identifying who are the customers, but how do you actually get in touch with them?
Okay. So, but would you like to explain that how you did it in a polo shield, for example?
I can't really do that.
Okay.
But I can give you some examples for both of these parts: identifying the right target audience and reaching out to the right target audience.
Sure.
And you can do that for various reasons, and I'll try to explain how and why.
Okay.
So, which one do you want to hear first?
Let's learn how you identify who you'd like to target.
Okay, actually a great question. There are actually different stages for this. It's going to be different if you're doing it when you're like a one-person startup and you're validating an idea, and it's going to be different if you already have a product, and it's going to be even more different if you have a product that's like already well known. I'm going to focus more on like the earlier stages, because I see a lot of like startup founders, and I also work with a lot of companies who are like building their next product, and they need to find who's like the ideal customer for that next product, like what's their next growth engine. Let's think about a company that's developing a logistics service for e-commerce shops. Okay, so as they're doing this, they're starting to identify, based on their own like experience and work, what's really special about their solution and what kind of people are going to be most interested in that. So say that they find that their solution works best for specific sizes of like e-commerce shops, where the owner is also the guy that's taking care of the delivery. Why? Because that's the guy who like really understands it, and that's the guy that if you save him enough time, he's gonna like be interested in buying almost immediately.
So you're talking about working with a company that's they think that their ICP, their ideal customer profile, is an owner of a e-commerce company who's also responsible for
taking care of like the shipping the items
shipping
to the customers.
Okay, shipping.
So if we give this guy,
so that means it's a small company. It's a very small company. If the owner
it not only has to be a small company, but
Right.
also a small company where this particular person takes care of that particular job. Okay. So, and why is that a challenge? Because say you have X amount of SDRs or X amount of field reps, and they need to visit shops to sell them your solution. If they're gonna call all the e-commerce shops on whatever list they bought, and they don't have this information, they might sell to maybe 1 out of 100 shops. Okay. But if we can identify, if we can give them a narrower list of only the shops that are like particularly relevant to what they're trying to achieve, then instead of like a 1% win rate, they're going to have 80% win rate with the same amount of reps.
Right. So you're convincing us why it's very effective to narrow down your list by some criteria.
Exactly.
So now
exactly. So for this particular example, one of the things that you can do is you take the same list of of potential customers, but you start to communicate with them using methods that they're going to be communicative on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to find out, for example, who takes care of shipping,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you can ask a question on their chat box on their website, or you can send an email to ask them this question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever response you get, you don't actually have to get responses from all of them. As long as you get responses from enough of them, and that enough of the answers come out positive, you're now building a list. You're now building the proper list for your SDR.
You're actually, you want to see who is the person who's responding to your request about shipping.
Yeah, and then whether
idea.
that guy is also the owner of the shop or
How
not.
do you know that they're the owner?
You can see their name
Yes.
from the response.
Yes.
You can ask them if they're the owner. So
Okay.
once you're already communicating,
Through the chat?
So once you're
Okay.
already communicating,
Yeah.
you can do a lot of things, and you can let them like self-qualify themselves, right?
Okay.
And the second you know enough about them, that's when you activate your field rep or your SDR. So that's one example.
And you would typically use some kind of bot that you would put together to correspond with all these chats?
So that's one example.
Okay.
Let's think about other examples. Let's say you're building a tool for DevOps guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a question of whether this tool is going to be particularly helpful for companies that have just hired their first DevOps guy,
Mm-hmm.
or for companies that already have 5 or 6, or for companies who are hiring a DevOps guy, and maybe you can replace that guy and put off the hiring for another 4 to 6 months. So all of these are different scenarios. And the issue is, first of all, you as like the person who's making the product, sometimes you don't really know, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you actually have to go out and talk to each one of these customer segments,
Mm-hmm.
And find out which one of them your product resonates the most with. It's not the most advisable way to do things because it's kind of a solution looking for a problem, but let's assume that you've identified that we're looking for companies that are just hiring their first DevOps rep. Okay. So you can actually build a chain of tools. I personally prefer using Apollo.io, and there's another tool called I don't remember the name, but if you really want to look it up, look up Jordan Crawford on LinkedIn. So he has this database of jobs, and I think that his database also has that. But let's assume that you can scrape LinkedIn for all the DevOps jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now the next thing you do is you look up whoever posted that job, and you go on Apollo.io or on some other LinkedIn automation and find out how many DevOps guys this company already has.
Mm-hmm.
And you make up a big list. And in that list, you have, you started with all the jobs, with all the job postings, and you are now able, once you have like another column that you've made with like programmatically, with how many DevOps guys this company already has, you can narrow it down to companies that have 0 reps and are now hiring their first one. So your next email is going to be hyper targeted because it's going to tell the guy, like the hiring manager,
Mm-hmm.
or the VP of R&D, hey, I noticed that you're hiring your first DevOps guy. Here's why you shouldn't do that. So you're not like spamming every company that's hiring a DevOps guy. You're particularly going after the companies that are hiring the first one.
I'm not sure that I followed you exactly. What is the method that you're using when you're relying on Apollo as your source of to scrape job postings?
So for scraping the job postings, you can do that on your own.
Okay.
Or you can do that with tools like Octoparse.
Okay.
Or you can hire some guy in India to do that. Okay. If you're particularly inclined to do that. It's not. It doesn't really matter how you get the information. Okay. And that's just the example, right? Because you can have a million other examples. And then you enrich the data with your, with whatever insights you're onto. Okay. So if your insight is this company has to have, this has to be the first guy they're hiring for the role, mm-hmm. then, I need to go out and find the insight. Because right now, if we go online and we look up what companies are hiring DevOps guys,
Mhm.
there's probably maybe 100,000, I don't know how many thousands of jobs. But
Right.
out of these jobs, we also want to find who are the ones that are that are hiring the first one in this particular role.
So how do you identify who's first? Who's hiring the
Who's
first?
hiring the first? Okay,
Yeah.
so that was the question. Great.
Yeah.
So for that, you can use the Apollo API.
Okay.
And Apollo is like this big database.
Mhm.
You can actually look up, there's an API
Mhm.
for Apollo that you can actually look up how many people with a specific title they have for a specific company.
Okay.
So you give them the domain,
Mhm.
you give them the job title,
You need to
you
subscribe
do
to
the
the
API
service.
call. Yeah, it's $100 a month. It's not a big
Okay.
deal.
Okay.
So you do the API call and you get back a list of all the DevOps guys. And of
I
course,
see.
if this list has a length of 0, then this is the first. And whatever other
Okay.
length it has, now you know how many DevOps
Okay.
guys this company has.
All
Okay,
right.
so you can do a lot of other things with this.
Mhm.
This can actually be used for any any company and for any role.
Mhm.
So, say companies that are hiring their first marketer, companies that are hiring their first VP, companies, whatever you're looking for, you can find in that way.
So the examples you're giving are very specific, and they are examples where you found a really good idea of how to get around identifying a target. Do you think that you could maybe think what are some principles that help you think about these ideas of where to look?
Uh, yeah, that's a good question. So you're kind of like making me formalize how this, how the thought process
Right,
works, right?
right.
We really have to translate
Mhm.
what you already know about your customers to how we can find out, right? So this always comes from like this interaction between I have both parts, right? I have
Mhm.
the understanding of like of sales, marketing, and customers,
Mhm.
and also the understanding of like databases and what I can find online. But if you don't
Right.
have that, you can probably have if you have a good enough discussion between like a technical guy that kind of knows scraping and knows how to use the internet in these ways, and the marketer, then the marketer has to identify the particular, like the very particular reasons that a customer would make a really good customer.
Mhm.
Okay, so you don't have to be a growth hacker
Mhm.
to know that your ideal customer is like maybe companies that are just now starting to think about hiring someone,
Mhm.
right? Or just now, as a marketer, you already know that. So probably probably the way that what you need to do is try to translate this into like technical terms
Mhm.
of how I would find that. And if you don't have technical terms, you can also think about what bots I can build to gather this information actively
Mhm.
for me.
Okay. So, do you want to play a little simulation?
Sure.
So, why don't I use your services now for Penguin
Yeah,
Strategies?
why not? Let's do
Okay.
that.
So, now I'm just for the record for the audience, I'll say I did not prepare you for this. Okay.
No, you did
So
not.
let's just see if you can be useful for us. So let's imagine that I'm right now. I want to get in front of CMOs of companies
Mm-hmm.
who have maybe in the last few months have downsized their marketing team significantly because of the whole environment now in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that happen
Mm-hmm.
all across.
Yes.
And as weeks go by, these CMOs have identified surprisingly that still some work needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they need somebody to help them out in executing campaigns, they're looking to get some quick wins, and they would be all of a sudden inclined to use an agency.
Yes. Okay, let's think about this. So first of all, if you're looking for companies that have just recently downsized,
Yeah.
um, I'm almost certain that you can have this signal already exists in Apollo.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see like what was the change in their headcount. It either exists on Apollo or on LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So this is the first place I would look.
But
But
wait
this
a
is
minute.
just one
Wait.
signal.
But
Yeah,
that signal alone is not a good signal, because I don't want to just look for the CMOs of companies who are downsizing, period. I
right.
want to identify those who downsized a bit just for improving efficiency, but not that the company is in big trouble. So I'd
That's
like to try
okay.
to identify that.
That's a great point. And there's actually a I'm going to ask you a question, but then I think that we can also move one step further
Okay.
and think about what other, what other signals you might have. But I'll give you some more examples. So first of all, you might look for companies who've only downsized their marketing team, but
Mm-hmm.
have not downsized other things.
Right. Good.
Okay,
That's a good signal.
so that's
Yep.
one thing that I would look for. I can't like particularly tell you which tools are going to do that, because part of
Okay.
what I do is whatever signal we come up with,
Mm-hmm.
I then go on and try all of these
Try
different
it out.
databases
Yeah.
to find, because none of the databases has all of the information. You really have to
Okay.
look at, and sometimes you're going to have to combine them. Take the recent changes to a headcount in a marketing department and and look for the other changes elsewhere. Maybe you can look up how much they're spending on ads,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is not going to come from the same places.
Right.
So, but I've never done that before, but I'm pretty sure that I would look at companies like Hrefs and Moz.com
Yes.
to see how much they're spending today, maybe versus how much they've spent last month and the month before.
Yeah.
So if
That's
they've
easy.
just downsized
Mhm.
the number of staff, but they're spending the same amounts
Or more.
that tells you something.
Right.
So that can really be another source of
Nice, because that's very easy and accessible information.
And then, by the way, whatever information you come by, you can use that for the email, right? Or for the DM. You can say, hey, I noticed that you've done this, that you've downsized, but your spend has gone up.
Oh.
So you must, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And I might not even look for, if I'm going to write a DM to this person, I might not even sell them anything.
Right.
Like I'm probably just going to say, hey, I've noticed this. How are you doing this? And if you come, and that's the psychology part,
Okay.
that if you go and you ask somebody a professional question,
Mhm.
we're wired to answer. Right?
That's true.
So, and especially like professional to professional, I can't
Yes.
tell you how many times I've done this when I was either validating an idea
Mhm.
or that I was actually selling something. But when you really start from like this
Give a
curiosity,
specific example of a time when you wanted to reach out to someone and that helped you. That approach of asking them a professional question helped you out.
right now I'm validating an idea,
Okay.
and I'm getting like 50% positive responses
Mhm.
from people to this one, to a very short DM. So what I'm just asking them to do, I'm asking them, hey, can I ask you a technical question about how you do cold email? And 50% of them respond. And
What's the audience that you're approaching with this question?
cold email experts.
Okay.
Okay. So, but you're going to be approaching marketing experts or
Yes.
CMOs, right? So they're like part of the same community.
Yeah.
And if you're in the same community as them, they're going to answer the question. And of these 50% people
Mhm.
that that answer the question, the next question I ask them is about whether they're, how they're doing this.
Mhm.
So for your example, how are you doing, how are you spending more money with less people? And they're either going to say, I can't really handle this. This is too hard. I'm gonna have to
So
rehire,
happy you asked.
or
I'm so
yeah.
happy you
And
asked.
you won't believe it, but if you're onto something, they're gonna want to talk to you,
Mm-hmm.
and they're gonna say, "Hey, are you like actually solving this problem?"
Mm-hmm.
And they're gonna be happy that you reached out.
Okay. But I like this idea. Thank you, Nemo.
Okay,
I'll
and
try it out.
I can take this even a step further
Mm-hmm.
and think about like maybe keywords
Mm-hmm.
that you can probably find lots of posts on LinkedIn by people who are either writing about this issue, writing about downsizing of marketing. So if you just look up how many LinkedIn posts there are on this subject alone,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to end up with a list of a few hundred posts and a few hundred responses, likes, comments on all of these posts. And you can really, like, if you use the right tools, you can actually make a list of all these people. You can ask the GPT to identify out of these hundreds of people with who is this problem resonating, who's responding to this with like with an actual response that means that they need your service. So this is another way that you can use to, and there are tools like Phantom Buster for doing that, for like scraping the posts off of LinkedIn, and for scraping the comments, and for scraping the likes. And of course, you have to link it with ChatGPT if you want to like actually have the intelligence of whether they're responding positively or negatively to whatever the post is saying.
Okay, so I'll link in the show notes all the tools that you'll mention.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
But I'm not sure, like intuitively, I'm not so sure that necessarily the people who are more responding to the topic are necessarily the ones that are going to be hiring
Yeah,
the help.
you don't know.
I'm not
You
sure.
don't know, but this certainly gives you a reason to reach out.
Okay, yes.
Like so
That's true.
so you can say, "Hey, I noticed this. I noticed that you wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to ask you blank."
Right.
Right? So you start the conversation.
Right.
Maybe this experiment will work, maybe it will not.
Okay. But good idea to identify them through the keywords. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go for it. So we've talked so far about how you identify the right people to reach out to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about once you've identified them and you have a list.
Right.
Give us some of your ideas how to get in front of them effectively in ways that are, out of the normal cookbook of marketing today.
So you can do this in one of two ways. You can do this in the more, let's say, traditional way of cold DMs, cold emails.
And when you're
These are the things
when you're referring to DMs, you're referring to what type of direct messaging? What is your go-to?
If you're B2B, then probably LinkedIn.
Okay.
But there are some areas where you can do that on Twitter, or on Facebook. It really depends. I think that like B2B is more LinkedIn, and like number two is Twitter.
And you're intentionally not mentioning email?
No, email is the basic.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said that before.
But
the email is email. I don't call that DM. So there's lots of ways to do that, DM or email, and sometimes you can also do cold calls with that. So this is kind of like, I specialize particularly in things that can be automated and written. So I don't do cold calls mostly.
Right.
But I do know that sometimes they can be very effective if they come in the right places, or as I told you, if the SDR is armed with like the right information, and they're not just spraying and praying.
Right, but wait a minute. Let's acknowledge for us and for the audience that we're now recording this in June 23. The amount of direct messaging that I'm getting on LinkedIn by all kinds of service providers and product offerings, the amount is, I think, 10 times more than I've gotten like a few months ago.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy.
So
So in light of that, could you share some ideas of what are some of the ways you think about making the DMs stand out and making them more effective than and rise above the noise?
Yeah. So we've kind of gone a full circle on, on where this should be, because all of these DMs that you're referring to,
Mm-hmm.
they're super salesy. So sometimes, I actually came across this great short video on YouTube. I don't remember the name of the guy, and he said, like, don't say that cold calling is dead. You're just saying that because you're shit at cold calling, right? So of course, all of these people that are writing these like lengthy messages and that are obviously salesy, they're doing it wrong. So, but so if you're trying to like do it right, then on LinkedIn it doesn't work anymore if you're just reaching out to the person to sell to them. So you have to be a lot more personal if you want to do that. You have to be a lot more passive, kind of, right? So you do have to hint to what you're doing, but if you're doing something that's like interesting enough, they're going to respond. So let me give you an example. One of my clients, they're doing they work with M&A teams, and what this guy and the messages that this guy is sending out, they don't look like the messages that you typically receive. And what he's saying is, hey, I used to do M&As at McKinsey. Now I help M&A teams do this and that with AI. Happy to connect. That's it. All right.
Okay,
So
so short.
if
One
what
one
you're doing,
thing you're saying, be very very short and to the
be
point.
very short and to the
That's
point.
that a lot of DMs have learned
No, a
that
lot
lately. So I'm seeing a lot of that, but I agree with you. Short and direct is
short.
really good.
Don't sell.
Okay, don't sell.
Say what you do,
Okay,
but don't sell. Okay.
okay,
Don't start with, hey, I'm this and that. I'm CEO of this and that,
okay.
because that already shows up on the top of the DM.
Right.
So that's a no-brainer. Just remove that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just keep it short, and just make the person aware of what you do, but don't pitch it. Don't be like, if they like it, if they like the idea, they might respond with like a thumbs up or say, okay, cool. Okay, and that kind of gives you permission for the next message. We should also not be salesy. It should really be like to actually start a conversation. So as I told you before, if I'm going to treat you as a peer, the first thing I want to do is just understand how you do things, and come at you with curiosity, and with like actually something that can be useful, and not something that is meant to sell to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, if you're doing something that is interesting enough, at some point, because of the where the conversation is going, they're going to realize that. If you can't really like, and if you can't do it indirectly, then I'm sorry to say, but maybe you haven't like properly identified what's unique about your particular approach, and maybe they really are flooded with a lot of people just like you. So you really have to think about the different angle of maybe how you present yourself even from the get-go. So
We're down to differentiation again.
yes.
All right, so I'd like us to go through an example, and
Mhm.
if you're happy to talk about some of the things that you learned at Apollo Shield, I'd love to talk to you about
Okay,
that
so
a
not at
little
Apollo
bit.
Shield, but let me give you another example of something that really worked. Okay,
Okay.
and it worked. This particular example worked in email,
Mm-hmm.
but it could also have worked in other ways. So
Okay.
I was working with this hardware company,
Okay.
and they were selling top of the line hardware for businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and they were selling it through distributors. When I started to work with them,
When you say hardware company, what does
like
it mean?
electronics, office electronics.
Okay.
Um, and when I started to work with them,
Mm-hmm.
they were thinking like, how are we gonna make this grow? Because they already had the product, they already had sales, their product was really really cool, and they had like dealers, and we thought like, how are we gonna do that? So we actually considered two paths. The first path was going direct to consumer,
Mm-hmm.
And the second path was, how do we find more dealers? Um, and what we found out when we did that was we found out that there are complementary products to their product. And these complementary products, let's call them like A, B, and C. If a customer was buying A or B or C, then it would make a lot of sense for them to buy our product too. And and vice versa. Like if a customer was buying our product, they would probably also want to buy A or B or C. And it turns out that these companies that were making these complementary products, a lot of them had dealer locators on their website. So you can actually go on their website, go on website of product A, search for, say I live in Texas in this and that zip code, and they're going to give you a list of all the dealers in that area code.
Because they think you're actually looking to buy the product.
Yeah, because
Okay,
this
yeah.
is for their
Okay.
customers, right? For
Right.
customers that want to buy their products.
Yeah.
So what did we do? We scraped all of the dealer locators of all of these products, and now we had a list of who are the dealers of all of the complementary products.
Nice.
Right? And we knew which dealers were only selling A, which dealers were selling A and B, etc., etc. So we really knew a lot about each of these dealers. And the next thing we did was we launched an email campaign with a very personalized message for each one of them, like, hey, we noticed that you were selling this and that, and here's why you should also be doing this. And out of these roughly 1,000 dealers, a lot of them, like a few dozens, became dealers almost immediately, and the rest of them, it took a while. But when your message really resonates with the person,
With the
and you
need.
give them
With the need.
and you give them a good enough reason, that's when the magic happens.
So what you're actually telling me, this is what I'm hearing. Actually, maybe it's also what I believe. That
we always hear what we believe.
yeah, I guess so. Is that the art is more in identifying what the person, what really is painful for them. It's more that than the art of how to write the DM. It's not about the right words to choose, but it's the right pain to focus
look,
on.
I think it's both, because you have to be relevant.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Like if you're the best DM writer in the world and your product doesn't resonate with the customer, you're screwed.
Right.
And vice versa. Like if your product is the best thing, but you can't write a proper message, that's also pretty bad. But maybe you can fix it. Like if you've spoken with enough people and you know how they think, then you're probably going to write the DM or the email correctly. It's the same thing like experimenting with ads, but it's more targeted because you actually know that this guy needs what you're making. So you're kind of thinking about like, how do I position this, or because I do know that there's really business value for that particular guy with my particular product.
So Nimo, I'd like you, and you've been in this business for quite a while, and I'm really interested to learn what were some of the highlights that happened throughout your career that they really stand out to you as things that you learned a lot from, or that really impacted afterwards the way you decided to steer your career onward.
So first of all, I really loved what I already told you about with the dealers.
Yeah,
that was
because it worked really.
That was so immediate,
right,
and so like on point that it was really that I really really loved it. I'm gonna tell you about two things that I did. That was before I realized that I was like a growth hacker, right?
Okay.
So I'll tell you about two projects that I did that just now, like when after handing over the leadership at Apollo Shield, I kind of had this moment where I had nothing to do because I was starting something new, and I was thinking, so what's this new thing going to be? And the reason that I landed on growth hacking despite the bad reputation that this
Term that the
that
term
this
got.
term already
Yeah.
has. And I do think that, but just looking back and connecting the dots, these are the two projects that really, when I started the Impact 11 6 months ago, I thought, like, wouldn't this be great if I could do, if I could do more of these projects all the time. um, and so the first project that was super impactful was how we got our first design partner at Apollo Shield. And that and so how did that go? We were accepted to Y Combinator. We flew to Silicon Valley. We got the first investment. We came from Israel, and we knew that Israel is like a really small market. So we would have to find some design partner or some customer in the US, and that's what we really wanted to do in the 3 months of Y Combinator when we were in Silicon Valley. So so what I ended up doing, and this again was 7 years ago, was I built a bot on LinkedIn. I probably built the first LinkedIn bot in the world, or at least the first one that I know of. And turns out that in the US, the sheriffs are public figures. They have to be elected. So they were all on LinkedIn.
Remind the audience, what were you offering?
And we were offering Homeland Security equipment to detect drones and to drive them away. And back then, Amazon was just starting to talk about their like drone delivery service. But honestly, a lot of criminals were already using drones to deliver drugs into prisons.
Wow.
So back then, my job as like the CEO was to go find customers. And I did what I knew how to do instinctively. And I wrote a LinkedIn bot, and this LinkedIn bot would request connection requests from all of the sheriffs in the United States. And whoever accepted my friend request, I would go on and ask them. My bot would go on and ask them, "Hey, I'm really impressed by your resume."
Were you impressed?
Yeah, of course. I mean, being a sheriff is a big deal.
Okay.
I'm really super impressed.
Okay.
But I really understood that I could really do it. Like I could really only do that at scale, right? Because there's no way that I would have been able to identify which sheriffs in the U.S. have a drone problem, right?
Right.
So I really had to do this at scale, and I told them that that I'm really impressed by their resumes, and we're a startup that came from Israel, and we're in the Silicon Valley now, and we raised some money, and I would like their advice on how to do, on how to handle drone intrusions into prisons or into jails. And
advice. You asked them for advice.
I asked them for advice, and like I told you before, and this is a hack that really only works for like when you're starting out, right? And also when the field is very early,
right?
Okay, and why does that work? Because if this person has a drone problem, and you just told him that you're a anti-drone startup, this guy's gonna want to talk to you.
Definitely.
So, and they did.
Right.
Okay, and so that's why within those 3 months at Apollo Shield, we were able to install the first system in Houston, Texas, for the sheriff's department, and doing that in 3 months was really incredible. And that's when we were up on the stage at the final day of Y Combinator, and we told the audience that, hey, like, we have this already installed. This blew their minds. And that's how we raised $3 million and went on to build the company. So this was the first influential point. And again, like today, it might not be because we have all of these LinkedIn bots, but back then,
no, but it's still a very valid method to reach out.
It still is. It 100% still is. And I think that, like, for B2B founders, for sure, this is how they're going to get their first customers, for sure. This is the best way. Other than, like, if you personally know these people, and I didn't know any sheriffs in the US, so I had to do that. The second part, which was really, really cool, and again, this was something that I did when I was just a freelancer. Like, I didn't know that I didn't have all the dots to connect back then to
Mm-hmm.
say like this is part of my journey to becoming a growth hacker.
Mm-hmm.
But I was working for I did this project for an app company, uh, and that app company, they were making a video app where you could shoot yourself in a video with celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
So
Not really with the
not
celebrity.
really with the
It's
celebrities,
just.
they would make up these, these scenes
Mm-hmm.
where, for example, Heidi Klum is on the phone
Mm-hmm.
and she's calling someone, and then you get the scene is cut, and now you shoot yourself on the phone like you're speaking
Right.
with Heidi Klum, right?
Yeah.
So they have all these videos, all these like video memes
You're
with
editing yourself into a video with a celebrity.
exactly, you're editing
Okay.
yourself into a video with celebrity. And back then, again, 7 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
Vine was super popular.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that like TikTok is kind of like what Vine was 7 years ago. And back then, what the most popular video was a video of Taylor Swift. The song was "Shake It Off,"
Mm-hmm.
and she would be like dancing, and at some point in the video, she would do this gesture,
Mm-hmm.
and then the video is cut, and you shoot yourself, and you video yourself, and you edit that into the video, blah blah blah. So, and this became like really popular on that video app. And what we did was we actually wrote a bot that downloaded all of the videos that had a hashtag dance
Mm-hmm.
in the video. And whatever video we found, we would edit the people dancing into the Taylor Swift video.
Okay.
So when Taylor Swift did that,
And then for the audio listeners, you're pointing your fingers
Yeah.
to the front of the camera.
yeah, when like Taylor Swift would point at you,
Yeah.
now we'd stitch in the video of these people dancing.
Right.
And we actually like made this short video and reposted it back as a reply to whoever posted the original dance video.
Cool.
And this became a huge hit. Like within 3 hours, our hashtag got to the top of the trending charts. And so that was also one of my first growth hacks, like 7 years ago.
Okay.
And that's what really.
So what did you learn from it that still applies today, that you could use today?
So what
What's
still
the
applies
essence?
today is actually this really applies to the same thing that I told you about before.
Mm-hmm.
Is this is about connecting with people around specific topics that are interesting to them.
Or also, another thing I would take out of that is that as a marketer, it's really useful to look for something that's specifically now trending,
right,
and then try to ride that using people's attention to that trending thing
mm-hmm.
to grab through that attention to your pitch.
Exactly. And one guy that did this particularly well, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
is Tom Orbach from Wiz. He's
Mhm.
one of the he's amazing growth hacker. And what he did was they actually posted something on Christmas,
Mhm.
and they have this meme of ugly sweaters. Turns out that this is like a big thing, and they posted a post that whoever would post whoever would say that they want an ugly sweater, like they have to tag 4 friends, blah blah blah, and the winners will get the ugly sweaters. And what they did was whoever commented on that, they would go and they would stitch his face on a person, like on a person with this ugly sweater. And in the response, they posted that picture. So that really made people laugh because it was like personalized to them in
Right.
the same way that my Taylor Swift video was personalized to to whoever originally uploaded the dance.
Yeah.
And people really liked that. This post became a huge hit. So really, I
People
think
like to see their face on all kinds of
yeah,
content.
people like to be recognized. People like to be if you're able to like take something that they did and do something with it, alter it, make them laugh, connect with them, and this then it's a huge way that you can really connect with people.
Are you familiar with some useful tools now that they make it easy to personalize the reach out with video which is very or images or video that are very very personalized to the person you're writing to?
So actually, I think that there are some cold email image personalizers.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're sending somebody a cold email,
Right.
and you can have a photo of yourself holding a sign,
Okay.
and that sign would say that person's name.
Mm-hmm.
So it would kind of feel to them that,
That
hey,
it's
I mean, this
personalized.
person
Yeah.
actually personalized it. So the tool that can do that is called Lemlist. But
We'll link to that also.
yeah, so they can do that. I guess there are others, and there are also a handful of other email personalizers and DM personalizers that like read your LinkedIn account and can tell you, like, can congratulate you on something, or can. But I don't personally like these ones particularly, because um, they they've also become kind of like robotic and generic. I don't care if you're sending me a DM. I don't care that your sister went to the same school that I did. It's like it doesn't resonate with anything that I've actually done
Mm-hmm.
lately,
Mm-hmm.
that's like really relevant to what you're doing. But
I know a lot
with
of people who would argue with you about that. That would say that reaching out to someone and telling you, "Oh, by the way, I went to school with your sister."
that's a
That
valid point. That's
some
a valid
people
point.
think
Anyway,
that works.
I don't think I would lead with that. Maybe
Okay.
I would like personalize it at the bottom of the message,
Okay.
just as a small candy
Okay.
at the bottom. But I really like what I told you about, like a Phantom Buster, which
Mm-hmm.
can scrape people's responses to posts,
Mm-hmm.
and can like actually address what they wrote in that. This is a super powerful tool, and I think that if you use that right, you're really gonna be able to connect with people in a different level than.
So
Uh,
repeat the name of the tool.
so what you need is a chain of like several tools,
Mm-hmm.
but probably the most useful one that you're gonna have to build around is Phantom Buster, and
Phantom
you need to
Buster.
download
Okay.
a list of like posts that talk about a specific subject, and replies, and check the posts and the replies and the people, and see, you're gonna have to like build yourself a list, like we said before, and narrow this down with what GPT can make of this person's response. And if there also happen to be a VP of marketing at a target company, that's when you have like the bingo, and that's when you want to reach out to that person.
Ooh. Okay. So I think you've mentioned lots of useful nuggets, and we're nearing the end of the interview. So I want to ask you, first of all, two questions as to kind of close up. Do you think that the process that you described, where you're, working with a company first to identify what's unique about what's the very, very specifics of their target audience, and then afterwards working with them to identify how very specifically to approach these people. Do you anticipate that in the next, maybe say 2-3 years, this process would be heavily assisted by AI in a way that not everybody will need to seek a very smart growth hacker like yourself, but they could just rely on these AI tools to do that?
So a lot of the things already are being built with AI. For
Mm-hmm.
example, um, this idea of looking at what people have posted and like specifically addressing that's really only recently become possible with AI, because
Mm-hmm.
this is something that you can like really make of a person response and classify it, whether it means that they might be interested in what you do or not, or whether this indicates a frustration with a particular situation or not. This is something that you couldn't do before, but now you can do with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already being impacted with AI. I think that the two things that are not going to change are the fact that it's really hard to reach product market fit. And why is that? Because when you're building something new, you don't necessarily know at the onset what particular point is resonating with your audience. Sometimes I talk with entrepreneurs and they say, okay, so I'm just gonna write a bunch of ad copy and I'm gonna see which one resonates. But this process doesn't usually work because you really have to talk with people and understand them, and only from this like understanding are you able to actually extract the parts that they care about and the
Mm-hmm.
parts that you can help with. So I think that this part is like the magic part that I'm not really sure that AI will be able to solve. And there's also a part that we haven't spoken about
Mm-hmm.
where this whole process, when you're pre product market fit,
Mm-hmm.
um, you actually have to do a lot of experimentation in a lot of different areas and fields across a lot of different maybe target personas, and maybe with this the same target persona you want to test three value propositions and you're not sure. So you really have a lot of space that you need to cover.
By the way,
What I
this is
told you
also,
so
wait,
far.
I just want to make a point that what you're saying is also valid for post product market fit, because you're still needing to validate what are the messaging and what exactly is the segments where you're going to market and so on. So all this validation is still relevant, uh, even if you do have product market fit, but now you're looking to scale in very significant segments. It's still the
Right.
same kind of problem.
Right. I agree that this can be the same kind of problem, especially when you're going after new segments
Yeah.
with the same product.
Yeah.
The way that I think about it is I told you about, like in this meeting, I
Mm-hmm.
told you about a lot of like miracles, right? But
Right.
these miracles don't only happen if you're systematically trying different approaches and and you think about it in like a methodical way, right? So
Right.
you don't just throw something at, you don't just do a lot of cold DMs and then say, hey, DMs don't work, because you have to get good at it, first of all, and you have to try many different scenarios, right? Maybe DMs don't work for VPs at, these companies, for VPs of engineering,
Mm-hmm.
but they are going to work for the newly hired DevOps guy,
Right.
right? So if you're not trying all of these different things,
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna get the results. And I don't think there's gonna be like an AI that's really going to try all of these things on your behalf, right? So it's gonna be very heavily
Yeah.
assisted. Like you're gonna say, I want to reach out to these people.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, maybe AI will help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that over time, it's going to become increasingly important that you, like whoever is building the thing, is actually managing the process and talking with customers. And I don't think that's going to change soon. Maybe, you know, maybe a lot later.
Yeah. Well, hard to anticipate. I've been like blown away with some AI abilities to think lately that I'm
Oh, it's
really, I'm
definitely
really
it's definitely doing a
puzzled.
lot. It's
Yeah.
definitely doing a lot. And I think that a lot of the people, like when you're writing, even when you're writing
Mm-hmm.
something, AI can make it better faster, right?
Right.
So this is for sure already changing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm really curious to see what else is going to happen.
Yeah. I'm curious and excited and scared all together,
Yeah,
like we all
but you
are.
have to, but I like it. I like riding the wave because um, I think that it's going to be best if we learn how to use these tools and to become like really good at utilizing them. Of course, the people that are not gonna know how to do that and are gonna be replaced by these tools, that's tough luck. So I focus a lot on learning and a lot on like trying out new things and understanding, and it's super cool.
Okay.
Super cool.
Um, last question I have for you today, Nimo. Is there anything that you can think of that you wish now that you had known maybe 10, 10 years ago or so, when you just, started it out? You came out of the army and you started your work in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you wish you had known?
Wow, I had like when I was just getting started,
Yeah.
I had absolutely no idea how things work. I really did not know how business works. Arguably, I still don't because you know I raised $3 million. I know people who have raised $300 million. The
Yeah.
way their businesses work is probably a lot different
Mm-hmm.
from mine. Um, I did learn that, and that's something that kind of changed for me uh, when I started this new business 6 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
is that what I the thing that I really, and that's the reason that I really love what I do now, is because there's actually a good fit between um, what I'm doing, uh, what I like doing, what I'm good at doing, what I can get paid to do. And a lot of people, like, maybe they think about, I'm gonna do this because it's because I'm good at
Rewarding.
it,
Yeah.
but maybe it's not rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, I realized that there is something about what I'm doing now that's like very immediate,
Mm-hmm.
um, that I didn't have in my previous company. It was a homeland security company. The sales cycle was months or even years. It was a very different industry from what I'm doing now. And what I came to realize is that I wasn't in the right industry. Uh, and I came across this concept of called ikigai, and what it basically says is that you have to consider a combination of four things when you're thinking about what you want to do. And and before I tell you that, I'm going to tell you a piece by Scott Galloway. He's a famous professor, and he said, don't listen to people who tell you to follow your passion because they're already rich.
That's
and
true.
and so it's interesting to think about it, and really, like, the way that and really the thing about ikigai is that you have to consider four things to, like, and
Ikigai
if
is
there's
initials?
ikigai, no, that's the Japanese name for this
Oh,
concept
all right.
of, like, how to choose what to do,
Okay.
what is your purpose in life.
Okay.
And if you can tick these four boxes,
Mm-hmm.
then you're probably on a good path. And I think that for me, 6 months ago, when I moved into something that really does tick all of these boxes, is can really make a difference. And these are the four boxes of
Okay, I'm
ikigai:
taking notes.
is thinking, what does the world need, what you love doing, what you are good at, and what you can get paid for. So if you're able to find something that ticks all of these four boxes, you're gonna be in a good spot. And if you tick only three of them and you leave out the fourth, there's gonna be something missing out.
Yeah. I want to comment that this is a really good goal to tick off all four boxes, but I want to admit that it took me about 30 years of my career until I felt I reached that point where I could really tick off all four of these. So it's a journey
Yeah, I
to
guess
tick it
you
off.
I guess you really, well, it took me a lot of time, and
Mm-hmm.
no one really has all of these boxes ticked off all the time, right? Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to make a trade-off and say, I'm going to do something that's not exactly doesn't exactly tick off this box, but this is a trade-off because I'm going to do this. But I think that if you're aware of all of these things and you can think about them, uh, like,
From
if
the
you can be
start.
mindful of that from the
Yes.
start, you're gonna be better off.
I love that advice. I think we couldn't close better with the very valuable advice for people who are younger in their career. I really agree with that. That just going after your passions is
It's
very
good, but it's
very
not
risky.
enough.
It's not enough. It's very risky. So thank you so much, Nemo. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I
And
love your show.
and I will include in the show notes a lot of the nuggets that you mentioned,
Sure.
so everybody can look them up. And I'm sure we'll meet soon in other endeavors.
Thank you.
Bye.
You've been listening to the B2B Startup Growth Podcast, bringing you the latest wisdom on marketing, sales, growth hacking, and life as a startup leader. I'm your host, Shoham Eckhaus, and if there's a particular topic that you'd like me to cover soon, please reach out to me on b2bstartupgrowth.com and let me know.